All right, we're excited to be joined now by Matt Miller from ESPN. Matt, thanks for joining us here at the Combine.
Yeah, of course. I don't think I've ever done Patriots media at the Combine.
Really?
Normally, you guys are like coming fresh off a Super Bowl win. You're not even talking about the draft yet. So I think this might be a first for
Well,
me.
you might have heard we're the third overall pick, so we've got plenty to talk about.
It's a different,
it's a little different now.
tune now.
Yeah.
So saw your most recent mock draft. You got Jayden Daniels going to the Patriots. Just tell us a little bit about that pick and what you see the fit there with Jayden.
Jayden is a fantastic player. I think if there were an award for most improved player in college football, he would have taken that one home, as well as the Heisman for being the best player in college football. You know, the running ability is notable. Over 1,200 yards the last 2 years each in the SEC. It's not easy to do. But it's the pocket passing, it's the downfield passing. You know, my favorite stat on him, on throws over 20 yards, he had a QBR of 99.5. That's really, really hard to do. He had 22 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on deep passing. So if he's there at 3 overall, not sure that he will be. As of today, that mock draft's a couple weeks old. He is a dynamic player that I think is that type of quarterback that could put a team on him early, just like LSU did this past year, and he's able to elevate what's around him.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, just with Jayden Daniels, it seems like there is some steam, at least in the media, about him going 2 overall to the Commanders, and I think that makes a lot of sense with Cliff Kingsbury there. So how do you see that now shaking out now that you've been here for a few days too?
Yeah, I think the Cliff Kingsbury hire in Washington was when my mind kind of changed as well of, looking at what, he put his job on the line to get Kyler Murray in Arizona.
Right.
Jayden has a lot of the same qualities. I would argue is maybe a better runner and is a better passer. So that definitely makes that kind of an interesting fit. That's what happens. You think you have an idea of where guys are going to go, and then a hire happens, and you're like, then Jim Harbaugh goes to the Chargers, and you're like, wait, that ruined my mock draft. So why couldn't you guys have done this earlier? But there definitely seems to be that's the way the wind is kind of blowing right now. The next few days are still very, very important to that process. Jayden is not throwing here, so there's not that opportunity like CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson last year, where they came and they put a stamp on their draft stock last year with their workouts. Yeah. We're not going to see that, so it might delay things out at least until the middle of March when we get the LSU Pro Day.
Yeah, and with Drake Maye, it just seems like he's become one of the more volatile prospects, honestly, in this draft. You either have a lot of people that think that he's got a lot of warts, and then there's a lot of people that look at him and see Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. Where do you kind of fall on that scale?
So I would say people have forgotten that Josh Allen and Justin Herbert had a lot of warts coming out, and they've turned into who they are. I was the biggest Josh Allen fan in the world when he came out of Wyoming. He'd had a terrible year at Wyoming that year, and a lot of people were like, oh, I don't see it with him. Same with Justin Herbert. It was, he doesn't have the personality to lead a team, or he doesn't ever run and leave the pocket. Obviously, now we see him as a really accomplished runner in the NFL. So I think for Drake, it's a similar situation where he's drafted is going to matter a lot. You want to have a good infrastructure in place for him because he is a young quarterback. He's 22 years old. He only started for 2 years in college and had 2 different offensive coordinators. So he hasn't had a chance to really settle in, learn, and build that consistency. So wherever he goes, whether it be Washington at 2, New England at 3, or someone after that, he needs to have a good setup, which almost every quarterback does. That doesn't make him unique. But I think that's where you're seeing some of the polarization of, man, I really like the tools. There are times he does things and I'm scratching my head. And a lot of it just goes back to coaching, and you hope that you can fix that once he gets to the NFL.
Yeah, and you look at with Drake too, there's a lot of helmet scouting, I feel like, going on
Absolutely,
with him, where it's Mitchell Trubisky, Sam Howell, those types of players. Nothing against those guys, but how different would you say to Trubisky in particular, just being a high draft pick himself, is Drake Maye at this point?
Yeah, the funny that Mitch was like the most conservative quarterback prospect maybe ever. If it wasn't there, he didn't take it. And Drake is the opposite. He will take things that aren't there. He will make throws that you don't want him to, which is where you get some of the Josh Allen comps of. He tries to put everything on himself, and there's some hero ball at times. And there are times, there's a free blitzer coming in his face, and he's going to eat that tackle to make a throw that he shouldn't make. And so very different from Trubisky, who was ultra conservative and quite a bit bigger and more athletic than Sam Howell was. And also, Sam Howell, we saw that drop off when he didn't have the star wide receivers around and the star running backs around him. We saw a big drop off. Drake this past year doesn't have Josh Downs, new offensive coordinator. Production-wise, there wasn't as much of a drop-off. It was just more so in some of the decision-making.
Yeah, I feel like sorry, Mike. I feel like the Trubisky stuff is just so wild to me that people make that comparison.
I don't know what we call this website anymore, but my Twitter bio has a line that says "Scout the player, not the helmet."
Yeah.
Because that's my biggest pet peeve of imagine if you looked at every Michigan quarterback ever and was like, these guys never work out. Nah, we're not going to take a flyer on a Tom Brady. Or LSU quarterbacks before Joe Burrow, Ohio State quarterbacks before CJ Stroud. So it's it's a risky game to do that, and it's just, it's a little lazy.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys could talk quarterbacks all day. We got to talk some wide receivers. Elliott Wolf earlier this week said the Patriots have to weaponize their offense. I think we can all agree that this offense needs to take the next step. I know you're high on the wide receivers in this class, of course, at the top. First of all, is there an argument to be made for the Patriots to take one of those guys at the top? If not, how do you kind of see that playing out later? Where could they get another guy
There's
like that?
absolutely an argument to be made for that. I think if you just look at who are the best players in the class, you can make an argument for Marvin Harrison Jr. as the best player in the class. Same for Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver at LSU. It's funny, I have Caleb Williams 1, I have Harrison 2, Odunze 4, Neighbors 3, Odunze 4. So I have them all like right there together, and all with like this big crazy grade because they're also specialist talents. So I do think, and to carry on the quarterback conversation, if they are not convicted all the way on one of the quarterbacks, this is the year where you should just not take one. You should take, because there are superstar wide receivers. There's a left tackle in Joe Alt who is a franchise caliber. Plug him in for 12 years and don't worry about the position ever again. And I think offensively the Patriots roster is in such a shape that don't force it this year. If you don't love the quarterback who's there at 3, you could also trade back. Get some draft capital, which is needed to weaponize this offense, and you could walk out with one of the top 3 receivers or the top left tackle in the draft, which all of those are equal needs. Obviously, quarterback, it takes precedent because of the positional value, but you have needs at all your core offensive spots right now.
Yeah. Any favorites for you, wide receiver position, day 2, like, those later rounds?
Yeah, so I love wide receivers. That's where I get in trouble because I like them all. Adonai Mitchell from Texas, if he doesn't go in the first round, it will be a travesty. But I look at my colleagues' mock drafts, and he's there in round 2, and I'm like, guys, what are we doing? Like, watch him play. He's got to be a first-round pick. Ladd McConkey from Georgia is another one where I use this line all the time, but if we could just watch guys play football and forget that we're scouting for the draft for a while, Ladd McConkey would be one of your favorite players to watch because he's a technician, he's tough, he never drops the ball, so quick in and out of everything he does. So it's round 2 wide receivers are really, really talented this year. And it used to be when I was back at Bleacher Report, we talked about, round 2 is when you get your receivers because of A.J. Brown, because of Michael Thomas and all those great round 2 wide receivers. Now it's become a premium position, but you can still get exceptional value after pick 32.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if A.D. Mitchell seems like a guy that's back into the first round guy, and I am surprised every time I see him sneak into that 34 range for the Patriots. But you mentioned Ladd McConkey, and I also wanted to ask you when we transition to tackles to Marius Mims as well, both Georgia guys. Both those guys had injuries, haven't played a ton, haven't had a ton of production. How do you view that as a scout, as an analyst, when guys have such a small sample size to work with?
Yeah, it's really hard, and with Mims especially, he only started 8 games in college. He had to wait his turn for Broderick Jones. Started a little bit in 2022, finally gets to start this year, then gets the tightrope ankle surgery, so he has to shut down for a little while. With Mims, what I like is those 8 games might be the best 8 games any tackle in this class has played.
I like that, yeah.
So you see the upside. That's what makes my job easier. And I think for NFL coaches and scouts, it's, okay, we've seen him do this, especially in the SEC. To see you do this out of Georgia and have that dominance for 8 games, we know we can get that from you consistently. It's not so much the highs and lows. Sometimes you see guys become draft bust. It's the highs and lows in a limited amount of time. With those 2, it was, especially with McConkey, I mean, it was dominance every time he was on the field, especially when he was on the field and healthy. It was dominance.
Yeah, that Florida game for him was just outrageous.
And
I mean, the route running
for
is
him
crazy.
to battle to come back in the SEC championship game and know he's not 100% told me so much about just who he is as a player and how much he loves his teammates and his coaches to get out there and hobbling through the game. You think like at one point it's like, oh, he's done for the game. Nope, here he comes right back in. So his toughness is infectious.
So I want to ask you about Joe Alt because I feel like we haven't talked enough about Joe Alt a little bit here, and I think the thing with him is that it's almost like a flavor thing with tackles. He's not a road grader. He's not necessarily the guy that has the heavy hands that's going to move people. But what really impressed me with him was his footwork and his ability to mirror guys in the pass rush is just exceptional.
No, he's a finished product. He really is. And some of that's Notre Dame. Some of that's because his dad was a Chiefs Hall of Famer at offensive tackle. But you're right. 6'8", 315, you think this guy's going to be a punisher.
Yeah.
It's not quite his game. He's a little bit more of a finesse player. But can you turn that on?
Yeah.
We've seen guys come out of college who are road graders and they don't know how to throttle down, and so they're over aggressive. That causes them to be, a subpar player. So I think with him, it's that, are you still able to put guys on the ground? Are you still able to get those pancake blocks? Are you still able to dominate in the run game without being, overly physical? I think he does do that very well. And what he does in pass pro, like you said, the footwork is, he looks like he's playing the NFL for 5 years.
Yeah.
He's just a pro ready to go right away. Like I said, he's a 12-year starter. You plug him in and you don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah, any depth on the tackle position, though? Patriots miss out at the top. I mean, big need for them. They really have to replace both spots.
Yeah, so I don't think that there is this year, because we're going to see a run. Like a guy like Amarius Mims probably still goes in the first round because of the upside. There are 2 good left tackles, Alt Olufashanu. The other 6 tackles I think could go in the first round are all right tackles. So it is a little bit interesting to where maybe someone slips through the cracks and is there at 34, but it's become such a premium position. And where this draft is strong, quarterback, wide receiver, tackle, corner are all positions teams are usually falling all over themselves to get early. So I think we probably see a run in the 20s.
Yeah. Evan, you want to talk about defense, Evan?
Well, I mean,
No,
running
you
in the
don't.
20s doesn't make me feel good, because every time I do my mock draft, because I'm an expert, right?
We all are, yeah.
I look at 34 as, quarterback at 3, tackle at 34. There's such depth in this receiver class that you can probably get a receiver at 68 that can still make an impact. But tackle at 34 is always tough, because there isn't somebody that I really love at that spot.
I think a lot of teams are feeling that same way, which is why there's that argument of, there are so many clubs in the top 15 picks where you say, okay, they need a wide receiver and a tackle.
Yeah.
Well, take the tackle first and wait for the wide receiver. That's just smart drafting at this point, even though we love those 3 receivers at the top. There are a lot of teams, the Chargers at 5, or another team a lot like New England, where you have that argument of, okay, we need both. What do we do here? And that could be where we see a lot of trade activity as teams say, okay, well, we're split on this decision. Let's trade back, and maybe someone will help us make the decision between the 2 players.
Yeah.
I just got to ask one about defense. Sorry, Evan. I know. We're
No,
an
go
offense.
ahead.
We're all focused on offense here. But just in terms of the edge position, kind of a sneaky need for the Patriots. Just overall, how do you kind of see that class, and what's the depth kind of like in day 2, day 3 developmental guys?
So there's not a guy you draft at 3 this year, obviously. But I think at 34, you could be looking at really good depth. And then around 3, I think one cool thing about pass rushers is we're starting to see teams draft for a role. Instead of, let's draft this guy and we expect him to play all 3 downs and he's got to play 80% of our snaps. Now it's, you need at least 3 pass rushers, and you would really like to have 5 or 6. So you can draft guys who are maybe a little bit undersized, like a Chop Robinson from Penn State. I think he's definitely a play at 34 and can be that stand-up pass rusher with great speed. There's a ton of value in that. No, he's not going to be, your first down right defensive end, against 12 personnel. But when it's time to go get the quarterback, he can be that player.
I got one defensive question.
All right.
I got a defensive question. I'm an offensive guy, right? Especially last year, we don't need to watch that again.
Yeah.
So, anyways, one thing that I've thought about a lot is replacing Devin McCourty in the back end for this Patriots defense.
Yeah.
And I watched a lot of college football, and it's so much quarters heavy, split safety heavy, and it's hard to find that true single high center fielder. Who in this draft, is there anybody that can really play that post safety spot?
Yeah,
to you?
absolutely. Kalen Bullock from USC is that guy who has that over the top range. He's been a ball hawk. Is he a great tackler? No, he's not. It's not because he doesn't want to. It's almost like he hasn't been taught how to be yet. So I think that's part of his game that could still be developing. But if I had to go with that almost center fielder type safety in this class, it would be him.
Got it.
Great. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Great stuff from Matt. Check out all his work on ESPN, all your mock drafts. When's the next one coming out?
I don't know. I think in 2 weeks.
I'm surprised they don't have you do one every single day at this
I
point.
would do one every day is the problem. But we have this guy named Mel Kiper Jr., so
I've heard of him,
he
yeah.
takes priority on the mock drafts. Yeah.
Awesome stuff, Matt. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.